All right, let's talk about a device that completely changed the world, the telephone. It is an absolutely wild story that starts with a simple wire and, believe it or not, ends with a literal supercomputer in your pocket.
I mean, really think about it. This whole revolution happened right under our noses, one giant leap at a time. So how did we get from connecting just 2 rooms to connecting pretty much the entire planet? Well, that's what we're here to find out. So here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to look at 5 revolutionary moments, starting with the first wired networks, then cutting the cord, then adding all the cool features, the smartphone explosion, and finally the world that all of this created.
Let's rewind. The story doesn't just begin with an invention. It begins with a massive, massive challenge. Because, let's be honest, a phone is pretty useless if you've got no one to call.
Now, a lot of pioneers were trying to figure out how to transmit voice, people like Antonio Meucci. But it was Bell's patent and that now famous first call that really lit the fuse and officially kicked off the telephone era. But there was a huge problem. You see, those early phones could only connect to one other specific device. That's it. To make them actually useful, you needed a way to connect any phone to any other phone on the network. The big aha moment, the breakthrough solution, was the telephone exchange. And you can really see the evolution right here. It started with actual human operators manually plugging cords into a switchboard for just 21 people. Then you get automatic mechanical switches, and eventually that gives way to the digital exchanges that laid the groundwork for everything we have today. So for nearly 100 years, the phone was literally chained to a wall. The next monumental leap forward was, you guessed it, cutting that cord completely. And the story behind this is just fantastic. Picture this. Martin Cooper is standing on a street in New York City, and he makes this historic call, just to prove to his biggest competitor that his company, Motorola, had won the race to build a truly portable phone. How cheeky is that? But just because it was portable didn't mean you or I could get one. No way. When the first commercial version finally hit the market a decade later, they called it the Brick. It cost the same as a small car. It's a classic example of how new tech rolls out, right? Only the wealthiest can get their hands on it first. And for that insane price, you got 30 minutes of talk time. That's after charging it for 10 full hours. It was a revolution, for sure, but a very, very short one. Okay, so now the phone is finally free from the wall. So what happens next? Well, it starts to get a whole lot smarter. This isn't just about making calls anymore. It's about adding brand new abilities. And this whole evolution was powered by the networks themselves getting massive upgrades. 1G, that was just crackly analog voice. But the jump to 2G was huge. It meant clear digital calls and, for the first time, text messaging. 3G gave us a working internet, 4G made video streaming possible, and now 5G is connecting basically everything. So the key thing to get here is that the smartphone didn't just appear out of thin air. Its DNA was built piece by piece over a whole decade. Digital voice, texting, a tiny little camera, web access. All the separate parts were slowly falling into place. So with all those ingredients finally on the table, the stage was set for the main event. The moment where all these separate features would finally come together in one single, elegant, powerful device. Now, you might be surprised to hear this, but the first true smartphone wasn't from Apple or Google. Nope, it was the IBM Simon, way back in 1994. It had a touchscreen, it could handle emails, but it was a different, much more iconic launch that really lit the fuse of the smartphone era. In 2007, Steve Jobs got on stage and introduced the iPhone. It did 3 things perfectly. It was an iPod, it was a phone, and it was a breakthrough internet device. This one product and its app store completely kickstarted the revolution we're living in today. And then, just a year later, the first Android phone dropped. And just like that, the battle lines were drawn. These 2 dominant operating systems, iOS and Android, created the powerful duopoly that has shaped our mobile world ever since. Which brings us to right now. Because this isn't just a story about technology anymore. This is a story about how that technology has profoundly, and sometimes weirdly, reshaped every single aspect of our lives. This constant connection has created brand new psychological quirks. I mean, think about that little panic you feel when you can't find your phone.
It's real. It's called nomophobia, and it makes perfect sense because our phones have become like external hard drives for our brains.
And it has absolutely changed how we interact with each other. The psychologist Sherry Turkle calls it being alone together. You know that feeling? You're in a room full of people, but every single person is just lost in their own little digital world.
And that urge to check your phone up to 150 times a day, which is about once every 6 minutes, that's not just a bad habit. It's by design. It's the same psychological principle that makes slot machines so addictive.
And if you really want to see the impact in black and white, just look at this chart. One study found the average person spends almost 3 hours a day on their phone, while focused family time has dropped to less than 45 minutes. It's a pretty startling look at where our attention is actually going. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, this incredible journey from Belle's first call to the device in your hand right now is clearly far from over. After a century of progress that rewired our world, it just leaves you with one massive, fascinating question. What comes next?